The controversial episode of the Joe Budden podcast has leaked. That's right, the episode that Joe Budden refused to release unedited has finally released unedited. For those of you that don't know, Joe Budden decided to delay the release of episode 676. All of this was because he apparently talked about the Diddy situation with Cassie, and it turns out that episode leaked anyway when they decided to upload it to their RSS feed. That's a whole lot of terminology. So basically, somebody made a mistake at the Joe Budden podcast and released the episode in error. They did not follow proper protocols. It's just a massive L for the Joe Budden podcast, as they did so much to make sure that the public didn't hear this episode. But what did the members of the show actually say? Well, I'm not going to be playing that because it's not released, but I did listen to it, and I have to give it to the podcast, as they were actually pretty critical of Diddy in this instance, with Ice being the biggest naysayer and saying that he totally believed Cassie. Also, Parks chimed in and appeared to be in lockstep with Ice. Ish was a little apprehensive. He seemed to be kind of pro Cassie, but not going all the way. He seemed like to be a little bit like on the fence. And Joe kind of more of the same. However, he was giving it up. He was saying things like Diddy should have found that $30 million to pay Cassie instead of letting it get this far, to the point where the public heard about the case in great detail. Melissa Ford was kind of just there, not really adding much. But I have to say that this whole thing was interesting. It was about 23 minutes in length, and it was entertaining and a very fun listen. I believe that they should have just left this in the podcast, as I don't think they jumped out the window too much. And given the settlement that Diddy made, I don't know why they took it out. The settlement doesn't really change what was in those documents. Joe saying, hey, this isn't proven, but the theory style was immaculate. It reminded me of what I loved about the Joe Budden podcast, about what makes it different than those amateur hour shows like $1 Million Worth of Game and Drink Champs. Sure, those shows are good, but man, the Joe Budden podcast, they can really dive into topics. That is, when they release them. And we have to break it down. This is an embarrassing happening for the Joe Budden podcast. It represents a systemic failure for the show, as first they did not want to release the episode, so they delayed it. And then it did release edited without the Diddy conversation in the podcast. And it still managed to make it to air. So basically, guys, when I'm telling you, if somebody's going to get fired or somebody's going to get barked on, that's right. I expect Joe Budden to come into the podcast and act like Nino when they infiltrated the Carter in New Jack City. This is a massive setback for the Joe Budden podcast. It's looking like amateur hour over there. Because not only did they refuse to release it unedited, it still came out anyway, so the purpose of releasing it unedited is not even felt. Now Diddy's going to hear what they said, and all of the positive things that they did do, standing up for Cassie, is not going to hit because they decided to not release it. Right? Ice earns a lot of cool points because he was not afraid of speaking his mind about Diddy. But Joe, I don't know about you, Joe. Now it's going to look crazy. Now your show really looks like you're not giving it up. You got to look behind the scenes and see who made this mistake. Was it Tanner? I believe he's the guy who uploads the content. I think it might have been Tanner. Was it you, Erickson? I don't know if it was you, Erickson, because you just kind of look like the video editor to me. Who did this? Why did this happen? The last time something like this happened, I believe, was when Save on the Dawn accidentally uploaded the podcast to Spotify after Joe Budden did that whole I don't want to upload to Spotify anymore because I'm not signed to them thing. But this is way worse, as audio that was never supposed to be made public was made public. This is a big black eye for the Joe Budden podcast. And I don't know, man. I don't know. Everybody at the Joe Budden podcast, get ready. Keep your paychecks. Behind the scenes, there might be some reshuffling. Good luck to you all. Nobody wants to lose their job on Thanksgiving. Nobody wants to lose their job right before the holidays. So hopefully Joe just tells you to take a couple pods off. You know, you get a text, and that's that. All right, y'all, that's my video for today. This is crazy. Leave it in the comments. Let me know what you think. What does this mean for the Joe Budden podcast moving forward? Will this have any ramification for Joe Budden standing with Diddy? Or did this really not mean much? I don't know. A lot of trust was lost. All trust lost. Like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. Oh, man. Pod Wars, man. Pod Wars. Pod Mistakes. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.
Danny from The Stop.
Oh, shit. Bullets.
I will find one of you niggas. I will f one of y'all up. And I mean that shit bottom of my heart.